The Short Game is listener-supported on Patreon. If you'd like to support the show and join us on our Discord, head to theshortgame.net or patreon.com/theshortgame.
Welcome back to The Short Game. This is a show about short video games, games that respect your time. I'm Reagan Kelly, and I'm joined this week by two fantastic co-hosts.
Laura Nash.
Nate Heininger.
And this week, we are talking about a game that was suggested and acclaimed by our listeners on the Discord. And I'm glad that they continued to remind us that we should play this because I really had a great time with it. That is The Roottrees Are Dead.
Yeah. Very interesting game. I think right in the wheelhouse of some people on this podcast.
It is an Obra Dinn-like in that it's a deductive game.
Would we call it a Dinn-like or an Obra-like?
The tag in itch is
now.
Obra Dinn. It's just a tag, like as if that's the genre name. I think I was talking to Justin, and we suggested like an insurance adjuster simulator because it's the same thing of like let's verify the evidence.
It is funny that I hadn't thought about that. That like the two of the bigger games in this genre and sort of the founding of it. It is just like piecing together paperwork for insurance, basically, or for like very bureaucratic reasons. You would think it'd be like, why not a interesting, cool detective? But I like this. I like we're putting together family trees and we're putting together insurance claims and things like that.
The onus of this is basically a person comes to your house, says, I think you're good at this. Here's a test case. Yeah. Can you do research? And then
joke's
says,
on you. I suck.
Yeah.
And then later on is like, actually, I have like 44, I think, people to fill in on this family tree.
Yeah.
Keep, same like Obra Dinn, every 3 people, later 4, that you fill out entirely, they lock in and confirm. But it really is truly sift through the internet, the fake internet in the game,
Spidernet,
and solve it.
Yeah, I would connect to this as saying like this is sitting in a place that is somewhere in between Obra Dinn and Her Story, because
it's 1998 as well.
Yes. And so you're doing that sort of like researching via a fake internet. There's actually several different types of research you can do in this. I think that's pretty cool. Collecting photos and excerpts from books and articles and web pages and other materials, and using all the information that you find there as sort of piecemeal as it is to assemble really just an absolute massive family tree with just an absolutely huge amount of information about, people from multiple generations of this truly messed up family.
That said, it's huge, but I think Reagan and I together playing this 6 hours, a little more.
We played it over 3 nights and really no more than a couple of hours per session. I can definitely say that of the games like this I have played, things like Obra Dinn and The Golden Idol and Chance of Sinar kind of tangentially, and things in this sort of wheelhouse. This is one of the harder ones. I think this is harder than Obra Dinn. Personally, what do you think, Laura?
I thought Obra Dinn was harder, but I think that's because Obra Dinn required more observation, and this was more. I already have skills to make logic leaps from text. I've got those from books and mystery novels and detective stories, whereas Obra Dinn was looking at visual clues only. So I found
that's a good distinction.
Obra Dinn harder.
That might be why I had a harder time with it. Something about, maybe it's my ADHD brain, but like something about being presented with, well, here are 6 articles to read, and then having to sift through that for
You're a
relevant
skimmer.
details.
It's fine.
Yeah, it was quite a bit harder for me. And also I found like its interface for tracking information was a little less elegant than the one in Obra Dinn, which is really just a master design triumph. But it's overall, I think they're in the same territory. So if you enjoyed Obra Dinn, then I think this is absolutely going to be something that you can complete and is really worth going that extra mile to do it.
Yeah, Golden Idol, Curse the Golden Idol is much lighter to me.
Quite a bit easier. Yeah, quite a bit. So let's talk a little bit about the setup here. Laura kind of mentioned it, but here's the summary from Itch, which I think is a pretty good introduction to the game if you haven't missed it. The year is 1998. A private jet belonging to the Roottree Corporation has crashed. On it were the Roottree sisters and their parents. Combined, they were worth over $1 billion. Now, due to the eccentricities of their great-great-grandfather Elias, their money must be redistributed to the rest of the family. But who's actually a blood relative? Blood is always capitalized in this game.
A blood relative.
Blood relative.
That's where you come in. Armed only with the power of your mighty dial-up modem, you'll scour for photos, books, articles, and other evidence. Then you'll make connections and deductions based on the family relationships you uncover. With every spot on the tree you fill in correctly, the names and photos left in your possession will have fewer and fewer places to go, but the evidence will also be harder and more obscure to find. Can you find the final pieces of the puzzle? That's a really good description of the game and also the sort of overall arc of playing it, which is about starting with this massive amount of information and, of course, starting with some details that are very easy to fill in. The three Roottrees sisters are dead. Like there's a nice little microcosm at the very beginning of the game. Among the people that died in the plane crash, that is one of the inciting incidents of the game, were the three Roottree sisters. And you have a picture that is unlabeled of all three Roottree sisters. And so as a sort of example of the kinds of deduction you'll be having to make, one of the very first things it does to teach you the game is, here are the three Roottree sisters. We have a picture of all three of them without name tags. We know we have to find all three of their names in various different sources like articles and so on. And search the web for things like fan pages about them to figure out what they did, what each of them did for a living, and be able to identify which of the three sisters in the photo is which, what their birth order was, so you can place them correctly on the chart. And also, for each person, in order to be able to sort of fully say you filled in a person, you have to have their photo, any photo. If you have multiples, you can use any one, their name, and their occupation. And once you have all three of those, because the Roottree sisters are three sisters, if you fill in all three, you get a nice little booyah.
Well done.
Well done.
That's a booyah.
It says booyah on
At the end,
says,
the
well
conclusion.
done, and then booyah.
Booyah. Love a
some rah-rah
booyah
there. And it locks those into place and removes all of that evidence from your overall pool so that you don't, get confused later on. So that's the overall sort of workflow here.
And there are a few order of operations things that are nice once you get the hang of it. Of you also have a lot of anybody who's not a direct descendant blood relative, mostly everybody who marries into the family, is considered an optional name. You can put as many of those in as you want. But the second you get those three, all optional names you've put in, all optional photos lock in at once. So it can behoove you to be a little happy with the guessing on the optional names, just in case you hit the third person and you lock in. So it's a unlike Obra Dinn, where there was I was a little scared to put uncertain information in early in the game in Obra Dinn. This one, especially for the non-blood relatives, because there was such a difference in the risk I was taking when I put it. Yeah. I guessed heavily on non-blood relatives to reduce the pool early, just because I could. And
it's like a crossword, favor. Unlike a crossword 100%. Where like if you put in a word and it turns out to be wrong, it can completely screw over your thought process for quite a while as you try to cram things to fit into it. But yeah, this is a little more forgiving.
So before we go too much farther, there's just a couple little things about this game that I want to mention up top, because I think this is an unconventional game in a number of different ways. It's exciting to see a new game in this sort of micro genre that we've come to really enjoy, this sort of Obra Dinn-like. But this is a weird one. There's a couple things about it that were surprising. When folks started first suggesting this game to me, the first thing it did, of course, was go and search for it on Steam, and you will not find this game on Steam, and really for two reasons. One is that right now the developer makes it available only on their itch.io page. We'll have a link
in browser
the show notes. And so, yes, you can play it in browser, and there is no download link on the itch.io page. I will. There's a good reason, I think, for the way he's chosen to distribute this. But one fact here is that if you want to play this as a Windows download, it is something that you can do, but you have to ask the developer, and he will personally, I assume it's a he, actually, I may not be right about that, I don't actually know. J. Johnston Games has a Discord. You can go and ask, and they will send you a link to a Windows download if you want. And that is what we played using, because I'm always terrified about itch.io browser games and their game save functionality. I'm always worried I'm going to lose.
I played in the browser YOLO, but I also knew that I was playing with Reagan, so there was.
I played in the browser and had no problems.
Okay, that's good to know. I'm glad it
closed out the browser accidentally one time.
And I had feel gone on and off VPN. I did a lot of stuff on the browser.
I feel like I gave it at least your mileage may vary if you accidentally clear your cache or whatever. Can't help you there, but just standard usage. I played it over multiple days. And I never had any problems. So I think it's probably good. I can't imagine you would release this game as a browser game without having done the work to make it at least work for most people. I imagine that you could accidentally reset everything. Which would be very disappointing.
I didn't want to risk it. I like having a download and being able to go and crawl and find my save file and what have you. But that is a possibility, but it's definitely not sort of the intended play for this game. This is meant, he's distributed this first and foremost as a browser game on itch.io. And this is something we'll probably talk a little bit more about towards the end of the episode, but it seems like the main reason that he's chosen this option for distributing this game for free on itch exclusively is that this game relies really entirely on AI-generated art. And there's a whole conversation to have about that as an idea. There are certain folks for whom that is an absolute showstopper, and fair enough. We'll talk about that later. But this is a solo developer making a game that has... it is primarily a text-based thing. Most of what you're doing is exploring detail and information and clues found in the text of articles and books and other things like that. But there are a lot of pictures of the people, pictures that we have to place onto the family tree and so on, newspaper article clippings, advertisements, all sorts of other printed materials and images from the web. And all of those are created using AI art. I'm not sure a single developer would have really been able to create this piece of work all on their own without AI art. Or maybe they would, or maybe they should have gotten an illustrator. We'll have this whole conversation, whether this was the right thing to do for this game or not. Mostly, I think the game looks pretty good visually. Yeah. I think the AI art didn't totally raise my hackles in the way that some AI art does. There were some
with some really exceptions.
Oh yeah, there were some exceptions.
The characters I referred to as the creepy baby and that very terrifying portrait of the four blonde women aside, most of the AI art is fine.
It's fine. But it's also not going to win any awards. It's just. But if the goal, and it clearly was here, was to create photorealistic sort of custom order pictures of hundreds of people, that's a hard thing to do by hand or with actual photography. Imagine having to cast the entire game and then go and take actual photos of these people. It would have been a huge undertaking. So having photorealistic art in this game potentially added something to it and was done entirely via AI art here. We'll have more extensive conversation about our thoughts on that aspect of the game probably towards the end.
Yeah, but I will say I was pretty adamant that most of the articles about this game have overstated the impact of the AI art, because this is mostly text. The photos are part of the story, but if you are reading the articles online about this and the discussion online about this, you will think this is a art-centric game, and it's a tech-centric game.
The one exception to that is there was a really good review of this in the Onion's AV Club page. I think at the end of last year, and they did a great job of sort of talking about what makes this game special apart from the AI art, and really just sort of come and talk about that towards the end. I think we can do the same here. But yeah,
challenge accepted.
All right. So I guess we've kind of already just very briefly set out, like, what is the workflow of doing the thing in this game? What else is there to say about the just sort of the mechanics of, like, I think might be worth talking about how you do the research in this. There's lots of different types of research you could do. You're mostly working via your like 90s computer, your fake internet. But there's things like periodicals and books and other stuff like that. Let's talk a little bit about how research works in this.
Well, you mentioned Her Story, which at this point, how old is Her Story? I don't know that we can guarantee all of our listeners have played that game, but if you have not, I think that's a high recommendation from the short game to go check out Her Story. But you've got a little on your screen.
2015.
You've got 2015. Wow. Yeah. So we had you have a computer, like a little 1990s looking PC in the bottom right corner of your screen that you can click on, and it pops up what I believe is called SpiderNet, right? Or something like that.
Spider Search.
Yeah. Spider Search, yeah. It's got great little like 90s looking art, and you can type in whatever search keywords you want, and it's going to pull up. It's almost like a narratively internet search. Like it doesn't necessarily pull up just straight up and down articles, though it will sometimes. It'll also like give you a summary of the types of internet searches, of the results from your internet search. So if you search for like Gwen Roottree, it'll be like, you found a number of articles about Gwen Roottree. They say this, and this about her. There's a long article about her book that she published on XYZ, etc. Like it's like a summary of all the different things that you may find.
I really preferred that. I thought that was a really good way of doing things, because it does let you kind of like get the feeling of having poured, like, we searched for Gwen Roottree. You found a page with, fan theories about her life or whatever. And like it gives you the feeling of, okay, well, I found a web page, but first of all, the developer didn't have to go to the extent of actually creating that entire web page. But also you kind of get this, you get it almost never returns anything that's more than like 2 paragraphs long. There's almost never any scrolling when you do one of these pages. It's pretty concise, and you get like and it will have quotes. So it'll say, hey, you found an article that says this, and then it'll have like, a 2 or 3 paragraph quote from whatever's relevant if it wants to. But I really liked that about it. It didn't overwhelm you with text when it wasn't necessary.
I think what I really dug about the sleuthing research interface is that when you hit something important that you need to mine for multiple bits of information, it will say you downloaded an article, you got a picture, you found a record, and it will save those as separate files. So when you're doing this kind of web sleuthing, you can trust that you might get 1 or 2 things from a web page, but mostly what you're getting is new things to search, new avenues to look down. So you can comfortably jot down like her husband's name is Brian, but also like 8 terms to search, because what you're really hoping to hit are those kind of deeper articles and things. So I liked that signaling that you can web search and get a lot like little bits of information, but you're going to maybe solve 2 people per. Anything you need to sit with long term or that you can't immediately use, you're going to have downloaded, you can access later safely. So I dug that differentiation of information. I knew if something was saved, I needed to use it. And what they really doubled down on is there's a little magnifying glass telling you how many clues per item you haven't used yet. So if I downloaded something,
such a clever feature.
Yeah.
If I downloaded something and it said 0, I was like, oh, this is just, I've already used it. This is just good flavor text. I should read this and move on with my life. I don't need it to solve the clues. But if it said 6, I was like, oh, I need to dig into this. There's clues here I haven't used.
It was so funny with some of them. It's like, things that didn't seem consequential at all would have this really large number. And it's supposed to indicate like your intuition as a researcher about how much, there was to glean from a particular piece of information. And sometimes it would be like, here's a pop song that one of them recorded, and it would have a number like 6 or 8 or something. And it's like, well, how on earth am I supposed to gain like 6 or 8 clues out of this random pop song? And I'll falsify here so I don't spoil anything, but it would be things like, okay, pour through the liner notes and find a connection with a particular person. Search that person, they wrote a book. Search within that book, that finds you something else. And it will always, but it would kind of tell you like, hey, this may seem like a little bit of fluff. There were bits of fluff, but it would kind of subtle, not too subtly, tell you like, hey, there's something to dig for here. And I really, really liked that.
The game is simultaneously wildly overwhelming and also very patient and hand holding. Because like when you get past that opening, you were talking about, you basically solve for the 3 Roottree sisters, which is a very good tutorial to how the sort of the base system is going to work. You do solve one little sort of puzzle, that I think you can solve relatively quickly. Of course, your mileage may vary on all of these things, but like it's not particularly complicated. And then the game opens up and you see the full the full family tree that you are solving for, and it just seems impossible. Like it's so large and there's so many people, and you're basically going to have to fill out this whole thing in order to complete the game. And like I could understand why someone might go just immediately like, nope. Like over again, you sort of walk you walk through it, you sort of unveil the mystery as you
don't have pages.
You're exploring it. This is just like blop, here's this huge ass family tree and you're gonna have to solve this. But when you do slow down and take it bit by bit and take good notes, there is a little notepad in the game, which is great. And you take good notes, it will sort of guide you in the direction that you need to go to some degree. You still have to do a lot of logical jumps and you have to be able to put it together, but it's not just like completely, here you go, you're on your own, good luck.
Another tip for people, it will give you a lot of times a date and an age and a thing, and you're going to think you need to do math and figure out how old everybody is. I was like, oh, you need to be X age to do this. And so I need to figure out how many people on the board are of this. None of that. Dude, if you start subtracting years and it's not to figure out which sibling is older than the other, stop.
I definitely was like, okay, World War II started in X, and
you think you need to do that because that's what other games have taught you. And I'm just like, it's a backup so that if you don't know what generation someone belongs to.
They're a little old to have been drafted into World War II, but if they joined the military in the 20s, you could see maybe they would still, it was like doing all that sort of nonsense.
Yeah. And also the game doesn't tell you. So I was convinced that this mattered in the end game. So even though the game kept not using this information, I kept writing it down. And I'm just absolving as someone who 100%ed this. Do not do that. It's a waste of your time.
I'm glad you were doing it and not me, because
you weren't doing it, but I was convinced this mattered.
We need to address that real quick. We flew past that. The two of you played this together on stream in our Discord, which I hopped in for a minute. I know we had some listeners hopping in and out and really sort of going through it with you, which I think was really, really cool. Do you want to talk about sort of your experience with that?
I think they had beaten this game also. So they were watching us struggle things they had solved, which was
That was kind of fun.
Which is very fun.
I'm glad we did it this way because, first of all, like I booted up this game for the first time, played through the initial like Roottrees Sisters thing, hit that screen of like, holy shit, look at the size of this family tree, and was immediately like, Laura, help me. And so I'm really glad that we played it through this way. We did the same thing with Obra Dinn and with Golden Idol. And this has become one of my favorite things to do. Like, I don't think I could convince my wife to sit down and play 8 hours of a research simulator with me. I don't have that, built-in support network. But being able to reach out to Laura and play this remotely over stream, this is an ideal game to do that kind of thing with, even if it's with, just an online friend and you just set up a Zoom call or something. In this case, we did it. This is the first time we've done it using Discord's built-in streaming, which was a nice feature because we were able to also have folks from our community drop in. And honestly, like it was a good experience, and I will 100% do it again. So if the community has any suggestions for games that we should play in this way, any group of us, you, me, Nate, Shane, playing together on a stream like this, I'd be absolutely happy to do this again with future games. And I think that puzzle games like this are especially well suited to it because, like, Laura was able to really carry me here.
Well, I also was able to. I'd started before you, so at the beginning we were catching up and then playing simultaneously. And I had my own copy of the game open other tabs, so sometimes we were able to split. Like, we got 5 terms to search and we don't know if any of them are going to yield results. So I'll search in my tab, you search in yours. And so it did a little bit of that. It felt like doing a real, like those actual things in movies where everyone's kind of doing research together. Like that's what it felt like.
I think
but
part
we
of the
were
reason
able to keep it in sync.
I think part of the reason that this sort of thing works so well like this, with multiple people, multiple eyes on it, is just that it also made me slow down and like talk through things. I'm a skimmer and I can miss important details in text if I'm just sort of like skimming my way through, an article or whatever. Doing it like this, playing together on stream, I was, reading things out loud. I was taking time to say like, hey, who is this again? To Laura, and of course she knew because she always knew. It was really just like it was like having an outboard brain, and also it gave
good
me
short-term
like a good
memory.
reason to slow down and make sure I was like getting everything out of the clues that I might otherwise have missed.
I mean, that's the skills when people talk about people who run escape rooms talk about who does that kind of thing together well. They're like, it's people who talk aloud to each other and don't put stuff in their pockets. And I think the virtual version of this is like, if you saw something interesting, you wouldn't just write it in your notes. You would say, I'm taking a note on this, or be like, that word is cool. Like outwardly observing. And that also helped me. I would talk through my logic before, like, I wouldn't just be like, oh, that name is Jonas. I'm not going to tell you why. There's no time. Like, we had all the time in the world. And it was kind of nice to also double check your logic that way, because you would be able to confirm that I was on the right track, or you'd say, oh no, you got the names mixed up. Gwen and Gwendolyn are different people.
Yeah. Stuff like that was really useful, being able to bounce things off each other like that.
And Nate, you played with Molly, right?
Yeah, I played with Molly. We did not do it on stream. And she's just like, I think it was a similar dynamic of you and Reagan as me and Molly, where I'm like, well, hold on, wait a second, wasn't he born? And Molly's like, no, just like flying through this family tree, because she's just way better at this type of game than I am. But either way, I mean, it made it more fun just being able to talk these things out loud. I hadn't thought about escape rooms, something that her and I have done a bunch and we really enjoy. So it is sort of similar in that way. It helps you process information better.
Yeah, I was going to say that this felt more like an escape room than any like Obra Dinn or other games like that, partly because of the sort of physicality of like sifting through the like documents and whatnot. But yeah, just something about it. It felt very much like a digital version of an escape room.
Yeah. It did. I got this piece of information, and then 18 things happen. It unlocks this. Like it physically, like they there is a nice tactile element to this game, and just the way information drips and drabs feels like an escape room where you sometimes have too much information. You put it together, you reach a like a gate, and then suddenly you have a lot of things. It's funny, the gates here are basically a new book. Like you'd get enough information put together that you got a new book, and suddenly you'd have a whole horde of information that felt very much like moving to a new room or something like that. I think even if I wasn't talking aloud, it would have an escape room vibe.
Yeah, I think you're right. Before we move totally off of talking about sort of the research aspect of this game, I wanted to say I really appreciated that it did a good job of sort of tying together, I guess, mostly 3 distinct types of research in a pretty consistent interface here, but it still sort of felt like you were exploring a lot of different types of stuff. So, you got your 90s computer. As you go through the game, you learn about 3 different resources, 3 different websites essentially that you can go to. There, you start off with Spider Search, and it sticks a little spidersearch.com sticky note at the bottom of your CRT monitor, which you can click on to return to that page anytime. But then you also get little sticky notes for a library card catalog style search, as well as a periodical search. And that was really cool. But what I liked about that especially was that, like, obviously 90s internet was very limited. Like, not everything was posted online. It's not like today where you can like search for something and you're basically searching the full text of everything ever. Here your web search was really just searching old school websites. And if you wanted to search information that could be found in, for example, the newspaper, that didn't exist online. So you needed to know the name of the specific newspaper that you wanted to search and a search term. And in many cases, you couldn't do general searches. You had to narrow things down. So just like with the search engine, like, if you search for like Roottree, it would be like, there's a lot of web pages about the Roottrees. You could search you could search the Butler County Times for the word Roottree, and it would say, well, there's been a lot of advertisements for Roottree candies, et cetera, and you're not going to find anything. But if you get a specific enough search, it would return a specific periodical article or a specific book and give you a summary. And in many cases, then it would add materials to your saved stuff, your little folders of materials. And I really liked the sort of like I think the thing that I liked best about this was like having to specifically like discovering the name of a new periodical felt like like a huge thing. Like we kept seeing things like mentioning tabloids, for example, but we didn't know the names of any specific tabloids that we could search. And then as soon as you find the name of like a tabloid, be like, oh, now I can search for all of these things in this tabloid that I didn't know the name of previously. Or when you find that someone wrote a book, you get the specific title of that book and the author's name, and suddenly I can go to the web or to the library search and search for that. And it felt like this other type of discovery that was always really exciting. Especially finding a new periodical was always huge, because then you could do tons of searches in a new periodical. I really liked that aspect of it. It was like sort of like uncovering new ways to research as you went. And it was very funny to sometimes be like, oh, great, a teeny bopper magazine with articles about like heartthrobs. This is going to be super fun to read.
You're so excited. And I love that when you open up a periodical and you do a search, if you don't have any hits, they kind of give you a hint at what the articles would be. Like, judging from this, there's a lot of information about dogs. And they're like, oh, I got to search dogs. Like it doesn't give you search terms, but you have enough. If you have enough Rolodex of information about the family, you can guess some stuff to start with, which is really nice. The only one that needs exact terms is the library, where you look up must have a full exact title and an author to get anything out of that one. But periodicals, pretty squishy. I like an option like this. The Spider Search, most squishy. Less squishy for periodicals, incredibly tight library.
I will say that occasionally, and this mainly really only sort of reared its head very close to the end of the game, it started really requiring to use very particular search terms in order to find things in ways that almost felt a little bit a little bit too much. Things like somebody searching for a particular person's name, they would have different variations of their name, like a nickname or that sort of thing, and you need to search a very particular version of it to find something very important. Towards the very end of the game, there were some moments that were pretty demanding in that way. And where we ran into a wall with something, and our listeners hanging out in the chat were able to shortcut us past it by saying, hey, to try this other variation of that name, where we just, you don't, when you're going in and searching things, you don't always think like, oh, I tried this. Did I try every version of this? And you can miss stuff and not realize that you have, you were barking up the right tree, but not, I don't know, with the right
It's pretty lenient, but for some of the optional things you're digging in, it gets way stricter. So I would suggest, especially if you're doing some investigating some legal information, you should try a lot of variants, because almost every other time you can put one type of name in and it will give you that, it'll have that synonym ring linked up in the search engine and it will give you information. If you're doing side quests, like if you're just going on rabbit holes for your own information, it's going to be much tighter.
Yeah, and what Laura's referring to as side quests, there are elements of this, there's sort of a core mystery that we're investigating, which ultimately is like figuring out the blood relatives and who's related to Elias Roottree in what way.
There's a white bordered box, and they tell you at the end of the game you must type 2 names in this box, and you will not know what that means at the beginning.
Main thread builds up to that. There are things, however, that are like knowing who people's spouses are, totally optional. It helps a lot.
It's also like totally, it's not just knowing who people's spouses are, it's knowing the dirt behind people's backstories, because you're like, I want to know what Luann did to the farmer's daughter. Like there's stuff like that has nothing to do with the plot that you're going to want to investigate, and that's the stuff that the search engine and the library and the periodicals need more precise information, because they want it to be harder to do the side stuff.
You also have to collect those 10 wolf pelts, which is a really complicated side quest.
I forgot about that whole UI for the wolf pelts.
Yeah, it was pretty intense. I mean, I think that's where like this game is a real feat of writing. We've been talking about the mechanics and everything, but at the end of the day, this game is quite a complicated accomplishment for in writing. I mean, just keeping track of all of this and doling out this family information in such a measured and interesting way, and doing it in a way where you actually are kind of like, ooh, what happened to that farmer's daughter? Like, I gotta dig in on that, is really compelling and really successful. It's I think a true work of art from a writing standpoint.
This is a puzzle game for people who like gossip. That's what this game is. It's like, can you search the internet and follow the gossip trail until you hit something real juicy? Like, that's this game in a nutshell. And it comes off as a drier mystery about corporate something, but there's a lot of avenues to go down. And I'm impressed we've been able to talk about it this much without actually talking about the plot. So go us.
Yeah. Well, it's a million tiny plots.
Yeah, I think we've been trying not to spoil things. I think we probably should have a very brief spoiler section at the end if folks have time. But I think it's definitely it's definitely interesting. One thing I'll say, the vibes were not what I was expecting off the top. I think when I first sat down to play The Roottrees Are Dead, I was expecting more of a murder mystery.
I thought it would be a culty too.
Maybe, yeah. It has that sort of vibe, but it doesn't feel like, it's not not to spoil anything about the actual like details of the story. But it is an interesting family mystery, right? Like, it's the kind of thing that you might investigate in any wealthy family.
Bad things happen to people, but I would not call this dark. I would not call this bleak, and I would not call this spooky, which are all vibes I expected from the initial imagery.
Yeah, just the name, The Roottrees Are Dead, is it sounds it's more darker than the game turns out to be.
Yeah, almost always we're giving the opposite wording of like, there is cat murder in this game.
Yeah.
This is not that kind of game. It's actually fairly clean too. Like there are I think one of the tags is that this is I wouldn't say it's all ages appropriate, because it's hard and there's can you read the internet and hear real stuff? But it's not, there isn't, you're at a distance from the content. You never have to read anything that's like sexually charged or violent. Like it's all like, it's at a remove. So it feels relatively clean for this type of game too.
Yeah. And yeah, the mystery never results in like, oh, and they had a like sex slave chain.
No, it's not that kind of game. Yeah.
Yeah, it's not that kind of thing. And yeah, it does have a remove in that like you are not one of the Roottrees. Like it is a family mystery. There's like heated stuff going on between these Roottrees, but you're just some guy, right? Like you're just somebody who happens to be good at Google in 1998.
Yeah. Now, if our listeners are looking for a game that ends in some sort of sex slave sort of situation, Reagan, would you please pull from your library and provide us with a list?
Join our Discord. I'm sure we'll have something to talk about. I do not have any sex slave games to recommend on this podcast, Nate.
But if you do, don't write in.
Nothing truly like there's family drama, but nothing truly like lurid happens in this.
Yeah.
Yes.
So I think we've talked quite a while, but we're skirting around the conversation of having a quick chat about like the nature of the art here. And we mentioned earlier, this is a game that's developed entirely using AI art. And I guess, it's worth just talking about our feelings about that and as they relate, because this is the first time I've ever played a game that made such a heavy use of AI art. I have my sort of thoughts about it, but what does everybody think about this aspect of it?
Well, before we get too far into this conversation, I do want to remind both of you that this conversation will inevitably be absorbed into the AI, and may, color its future feelings about the three of us. So let's make sure we are careful and we remind everyone that we love the AI bot, and everything else we say after this.
We love the basilisk.
Well, Nate, lest you forget, my work Slack that I spend my whole day on is completely foyable, as are half of my meetings.
Yes.
Any meeting that gets recorded for future use is considered foyable. So I am 100%, all of my life is going to be in someone's AI bot, because they're going to FOIA a bunch of boring government meetings, and then my face is going to be everywhere. So
that's great. Yeah,
that's my relationship to AI.
Yes. It never occurred to me that someone would be ingesting like FOIA-able emails into their models, but that's a great
they're going to
source of freely available public
corporate
content.
emails. Yeah,
it's like the Enron emails are the core of the.
Oh yeah,
there are some models. Yeah.
So first of all, I totally want to say, like, if you, and I totally understand and even totally agree with the argument that like AI art generally is not a good thing for art or artists. I think it is now other folks might have a different opinion. I think it's a fair thing. It's new enough that there's lots of different opinions here. I think AI art, is almost by necessity, the way that these models work is sort of extractive, ignoring copyright, ignoring artist intent, slurping up large volumes of art into these models, and then using it as a basis to create, transformative works that are, to one degree or other, drawing on earlier art. And there's an argument for, is AI art creating something new, or is it essentially just doing a like ultra complicated, high resolution photo collage from the art that it has absorbed into its model? And to what degree is that, fair use, like listening to a song and humming it and then coming up with your own song that might be similar? Or is it literally, copying and pasting somebody else's art in some form? I feel like it, to me, perfectly honestly, I don't really have a dog in this fight to any great degree. I'm not an artist. I don't have really strongly held opinions about this. I feel at this point like I do think, and I look at what's happening in the world of AI art, and I find some of it pretty interesting and compelling. I think it's pretty cool that, I can type in into a text prompt somewhere, create a photorealistic, banana with legs, and it will create me a photorealistic banana with legs. And I think I don't necessarily think it's something that's like a vital service for which we should necessarily upend the entire information economy and the basis of paying for art in our society. But like, I don't know, it is kind of neat. And so I think in a sense, the artist here the creator here has set a pretty good balance in that, like, they're using AI art in service of a game that they're giving away for free, and that it takes a lot of what I consider the more sticky arguments here out of the picture. This is a free game that's available, for anyone to play on the web,
and it's using fake photos rather than fake illustration, which feels a little
absolutely
different.
Although, like, what's the distinction between a photo and an illustration in AI art? There isn't much of one. So I don't know.
I think there's. I don't want to diminish photographers, but I do think that the photographic library has a larger amateur population than the professional artists who are getting put in illustration engines. For me, I think I have a very I have to have opinions about AI because, again, as a federal employee, Biden has recently signed an executive order that says government needs to have opinions on AI. So I kind of legally, I'm obliged to think about this for my job, not in this aspect, but someone was like, hey, Laura, I need to know, is AI crypto, which is a thing I can laugh at and ignore? Or is it like social media, which is the thing I laughed at, but have to actually deal with? And I was like, oh, it's social media. Like, sorry. Like I was like, crypto, you can comfortably, like, it's a huge part of a lot of people's lives, but you can opt out of crypto. I don't think you can future opt out of AI. So this falls to me in the AI as assistive device option. I've talked with somebody at work who works in Puerto Rico. He's like, it's very tiring some days thinking in English all day, and I can use ChatGPT to write some tedious emails I don't need to. And then I'll read them and I'll edit them. But sometimes I'm just tired of thinking in English, and I hadn't thought about that use before. Yeah. This also feels like AI is an assistive. I can't make photos. I can't do Photoshop. Like, the thing that hurts my heart here is that this is a game I would proudly tell people to go buy, and they can't.
And not just because the artist chose not to, but there is a rule on Steam. Yeah. Steam has a rule against AI art in games. You can't sell a game that uses AI art on Steam. And I think they have some good reasons for making that choice. Steam has enough of a problem with sort of like low effort, like asset flip crap games already.
Yeah, but this feels like the AI art feels like an interim step before hiring someone to create art based on the AI. Like this is what I'm going for. I need these types of people. I need this type of photo. I need to go buy a stock photo of X. I understand that people aren't financially set up for that, but it feels painful that a game with this much thought and work behind it the creator cannot be financially compensated because of this choice.
Yeah. And I think I understand why they might have made this choice. Personally, I would have preferred that this game have, even just cartoonish illustrations, hire an artist and get this game on Steam. I think it
might have helped, honestly.
Yeah, there's an element of this where, like, you could look at it and say, wow, there's so much art in this game. Like, how could someone create this as a solo developer? Of course he had to go to the well of AI art.
But there's so much writing in this game, and how could someone create that? There's so much logic in this game.
Exactly.
Yeah. There's so much in this game.
Yeah. Well, not everybody, most of the time people are really good at like one thing, and then they have to work with a team to create the rest of it, right? But this gives the tools of creation to someone who is not able to.
Yeah. So personally, and it doesn't seem like this is a transitional thing. Like, looking at this developer said this game is essentially done. They're moving on to other work. He's done a few different little updates, but the last thing said like, hey, I'm going to start working on some game jam stuff. Like, I don't expect to update this for a while. I don't think that, like, I could totally see a world in which you use AI art as placeholder art and later replace it and, then go wider with this game, put it out on Steam or what have you. And I would love to see them do that. I don't think that's what this developer is intending to do here. I think this is their image, their vision for this game is as it exists, which fair enough. But yeah, like I would have preferred a world in which this developer, reached out to some illustrators or whatever it took to create this game in a way that could go on Steam and charge $20 for, and maybe have less creepy doll vibes to the children in the game, and maybe have a little bit more of artistic cohesion to it. Like it has a bit of like it's not exactly a beautiful game. It's not ugly. It's workmanlike, and the photorealistic images vary in quality but are fine. But maybe this would have been better with a more like consistent artistic vision and a vibe that was something other than just photorealistic.
I think it almost assuredly would have been. I mean, when you like, art is a part of the package, and it could have been better in this game, right? So now, would it be so materially different that it suddenly vaults this game into like next level success? We'll likely never know.
I just I'm disappointed that it's the distraction. I mean, I think it's really important to talk about this, but I think I've looked at comment threads about this game that are about AI art, and I feel like it's overtaken and overshadowed the interesting mechanical and narrative things done in the game. And I completely understand it. It's a hot issue, and a lot of people have very personal connections to it. But there are other things about this game that are notable, and because of this one decision, that's the conversation for a lot of people.
Yeah. Well, it's a conversation that needs to happen, and
it's a bummer.
Continues to. Yeah, it is a bummer. Yeah. It's a conversation that will continue to happen and needs to happen as we figure out, what do we want from these tools? What will people sort of deal with? Especially like AI art right now is kind of bad. Like it's funny sometimes, and we all get a kick out of it. And it's like, ooh, show me a real life banana with legs, and you're like, that's fun, but it's mostly stupid. 9 times out of 10, any AI art is more like, look how silly this is, right? Look how weird and gross this is. It's not really it's not super serviceable just yet, but it will get that way, right? Like the odds of what we're getting out of AI right now being the end game of it are very low, right? It's just going to keep getting better and better and better. So I think it is a really fair concern for the sort of like workman industry of artists. You're people working for major corporations that will happily pay an AI rather than a human to produce art for their organization. I think
it'll be serviceable, but somewhat soulless, and that's maybe not a great direction for us to move in as a society in terms of like being able to appreciate good art. And it's certainly not good for the artists whose whose bread and butter might kind of vanish. It's
I also think though there's always like it's a complicated conversation, because this happens every time the tools of creation become more accessible to people. I mean, I was listening to a episode of 99% Invisible, which is a fantastic podcast, and it really focused on when the ability to record music happened, and there was a huge backlash, because up until that point, if you wanted music at anything, at a party, at an event, whatever, you had to literally hire a band. There was no way to play music unless you had humans in the room doing it. And so when the ability to record music happened, there was a significant backlash about how this is going to ruin music. It's going to kill the music industry, because now you can just record it and play it in the room, and you don't have to hire a band anymore. And in some ways, it did kill that industry. You no longer had to have humans in the room to play the music. But of course, as we all know now, 100-something years later, like, it was also the start of a whole new industry and a whole new version of the art. Now, this is different because this is actually now taking out the creative process. Like that was expediting the release of the creative process, and that's what most things have been. I can think of like even in the 80s when like arpeggiators and stuff like that started coming out, which were allowing keyboards to do things that like you cannot do with your hands. There were people who were like, this is bad for music. Like we can't automate these things because it's going to kill music. But then it actually led to a bunch of really cool genres using arpeggiators and whatnot. So there's always these concerns, but this one is a little different because it is actually completely possibly removing the human from it. But I also, it's like time and time again, when a new technology comes out, there's a lot of concern about it and fair concern. But like, I think people still want humans in their art. And while I think AI is going to
automate taste is the thing.
Yeah. I think it is going to change things. And I do have concerns for like the careers of artists. But I think that, we're already seeing like the writers' strike and all that. Like they have managed to like put into contracts how AI will be used, right? So at least right now, the writers guilds and whatnot are generally protected against major corporations just completely going AI. And I hope that we're able to do the same with artists, so it doesn't just become a whole cloth replacement, but rather it becomes a tool, just like any other tool. Like I've heard really good use cases for like the hardest thing in art is starting. I've experienced that myself too. And so using AI as just like a jumping off platform, kind of like what you were saying too, like I think that's incredibly intriguing and valuable. If it becomes where it's just the whole thing, I've heard theories that there may be a day where all free content is AI driven, and then you have to pay for anything made by humans.
Yeah.
Like sounds terrible on when I first hear that. Like, what if the news, like free news, was just a fully AI, like 100% AI generated station that you would go to on TV or whatever? Like that sounds horrible. But then at the flip side, like our current economic system of the internet kind of sucks too, right? Where everything is presumed to be free. And so everybody has to do all these insane things to try to drive money from people because we just assume the internet is free. So if free content goes downhill, it might drive people towards human created products even more because they're actually better. I don't know. I'm kind of rambling at this point. It's
I mean, it's one of those things where like we could talk for 100 years about this, and I am nervous about.
And I will not let our AI discussion be longer than the discussion of the game.
No, indeed. Yeah. So I'll just say, as it relates to this game, I was comfortable playing this game because it is so clearly the work of a human being. The writing, the development of it, the incredibly clever puzzles. This was not something that was churned out with ChatGPT or whatever. So like, while I have my discomfort with the fact that this used exclusively AI art for its visuals, the visuals were not the focus. And I was comfortable playing this, and I'm comfortable recommending it to people, even if they have discomfort with AI art generally. I may not feel that about future AI art in games. I don't know where this is going. I don't know where my feelings on this will go. Maybe in 6 months, I'll look back on having played this and saying, I can't believe I did the unethical thing of playing this game on the web or whatever. Like, I don't know. Or maybe in a year, we'll all be looking back and say, wow, every indie game uses AI art now. I don't know where this is going. I hope that it, I hope it's going someplace good. But I can say that this game was cool and I liked playing it. And even the AI art didn't really take me out of it.
I'm really intrigued about the idea of using AI less as art generation, but more just as like for creating interesting interactive characters within video games. Like imagine if the character, instead of having a set of preset prompts it could understand, it was actually able to use like language models, and you could actually have a full quote unquote conversation with characters in video games who are running off of the sort of machine learning, which is what we called AI until the last couple of years. Like integrating that into the games. Like there's so many use cases for AI that are not just the replacement of a human, but rather just like, improving the quality of what we're making. And that's the stuff that I'm super interested in. But hopefully we don't just, it goes in that direction and not just like the soulless recreation of weird bananas with legs and everything that we look at.
Well, thank you so much for joining us on this episode of The Short Game. We are at exactly 1 hour, and I think we probably don't have enough time to do a true spoiler break section on this episode. But you know what? Maybe it's really not necessary. I think if you want to talk spoilers, if you want hints, or if you want to, or if you just want to talk about the ending of this game, come join us on our Discord. We have a Roottrees channel that we've been talking about the game for well over a week, and we'll stick it around for a while. So folks are checking out the game. Just to remind folks, you can find this game by searching for it on Spider Search, and you'll most likely land on jjohnstongames.itch.io/the-Roottrees-are-dead. As Laura and Nate said, this is a game you can play in your browser and works just fine. If, like me, you're too nervous to use a browser-based game for this sort of thing, again, you can get a Windows executable if you ask pretty please on the Discord of the developer. I don't really know why that's the way that they've chosen to do this rather than just making it available as a download, but probably something wrapped up in their AI thing, etc. Who knows? Anyway, both ways seem to be perfectly fine to play this. And again, totally free. A gift to the world from the developer J. Johnston Games, and well worth your time, clocking in around 6 to 8 hours, depending on how smart you are. And let's see. You can find our show on the internet at shortgame.fm. That's the page where you can find all the links and buttons that go to all the things, including to our Patreon, patreon.com/theshortgame. Thank you very much to our new patrons. We've had a few new ones recently. It's always a pleasure to see somebody new join the Discord and hop on and say hi. We always love that. And let's see, that page also gives you links to all the places you can find the show on all the different podcast platforms. Have you left a review for this podcast recently? No? Please do that thing. It helps people find the show. We really appreciate it. And don't go start a flame war about AI art in our comments on Apple Podcasts, please.
Yell at us directly, which you're going to get names for shortly.
If you want to come into our Discord and tell us we're all monsters for playing the AI art game, or that you love AI and that it is the best, you can do that on our Discord, and you have to pay to get in. So there you go. If I didn't mention, all of our patrons on Patreon get instant access to our Discord, which is the main community for the show. It's where we talk about games. It's where we talked about Roottree. The Roottrees Are Dead. It's where we were essentially bullied into playing the Roottrees Are Dead by our many enthusiastic patrons. Thank you, patrons.
Bullied is a strong word.
I'm joking, of course.
We were convinced
they
very
just suggested
easily.
It strongly, and I would literally never have heard of this game otherwise. So absolutely thank you to everyone who ever suggested anything in the Suggest a Games channel on our Discord. You can find me on the internet at Raygan.me. That's RAYGAN.me, and that's got links to various stuff, including my socials. Laura, where can people find you?
I'm on most channels, Laura J. Nash, but most active on Blue Sky and Mastodon, which is Laura J. Nash at bird.rodeo.
And Nate, where can people find you?
On most social media at NateSTL.
And listeners, once again, thank you for joining us on this episode of The Short Game.